155 million years ago was quite possibly the worst time you could choose to be on land. This point in Earth's history marked the Late Jurassic period, an age characterized by a single, universal trend: giants. This was a world of titans. Ecosystems across the planet converged on the same evolutionary blueprint: an abundance of massive, predatory theropods and earth-shakingly enormous sauropods. And of every environment that followed this brutal rule, perhaps the most extreme and dangerous example was the Morrison Formation. The Morrison Formation, a vast expanse of fossil-bearing rock across the western United States, was not a lush paradise. It was the closest thing our planet has ever had to a real-life Jurassic Park, but one where the fences were down. It was a land of staggering extremes. On top of grueling climatic conditions like seasonal superdroughts, you could stumble upon dozens of theropod species and over 30 kinds of sauropods, the vast majority weighing far more than a modern African bush elephant. This was, without any doubt, a land ruled by giants, which makes it all the more impressive and all the more fascinating that one of the most successful, toughest, and most iconic animals from this entire ecosystem was not a titanic sauropod or a hypercarnivorous theropod. Instead, it was a medium-sized herbivore, an animal that, despite its seemingly passive lifestyle, is the only dinosaur on Earth evidenced in the fossil record of having killed a fully grown Allosaurus. This is Stegosaurus. Unless you have lived under a mountain, you have heard of Stegosaurus. It is consistently ranked among the top 10 most well-known dinosaurs. It possesses one of the most unique appearances in the history of life, which was picked up on by its discoverers 150 years ago when they found the first fossilized plates and vertebrae in Colorado. However, while they knew they had found something special, they were totally on the wrong path. The story of Stegosaurus's discovery is one of confusion and brilliant mistakes. Its founder was the legendary American paleontologist Othniel Charles Marsh, a key player in the infamous Bone Wars. When Marsh first uncovered these strange, flat bones, he suspected Stegosaurus had been a giant, aquatic, turtle-like creature. He theorized the plates didn't stand upright, but acted as a biological roof, overlapping flat across the animal's back, like giant shingles. This is precisely why it was given its name. Stegosaurus means roof lizard. Thankfully, not long after, more and better preserved specimens were unearthed. Yet these finds still took place when paleontology was in its infancy, leading to more inaccurate interpretations. One popular idea was that Stegosaurus was bipedal. Another incorrectly placed its tail spikes on its back. To add to the chaos, other dinosaur bones like Allosaurus and Diplodocus were also being found around the holotype. In the frantic rush to name new species, these bones were sometimes mistakenly thought to be part of the Stegosaurus itself. Eventually, a major breakthrough occurred when a nearly perfect skeleton was found. This magnificent specimen helped to quell any major confusion on how the bones were arranged, leading to finally the first reconstructions that looked a lot like the Stegosaurus we recognize today. Over many decades, reconstructions were fine-tuned. The current consensus is a quadrupedal herbivore with vertically pointed plates on its back and 4 terrifying spikes on its tail. It was a member of the Stegosaurs, a group of armored dinosaurs most closely related to Ankylosaurus. Within this clade, Stegosaurus belonged to the Stegosauridae family. Unbeknownst to most, this icon was not one dinosaur, but rather 3 distinct ones: Stegosaurus stenops, Stegosaurus ungulatus, and Stegosaurus sulcatus. They were similar, but with differences. Stenops had shorter legs and wider plates. Ungulatus was bigger, had longer limbs, and more pointed plates. Finally, sulcatus adorned highly unique tail spikes that were abnormally large. Despite these differences, they all had one thing in common: size. While not large for a Morrison herbivore, it was giant for a dinosaur in general. Estimates suggest an adult size between 6.5 and 7.5 meters, making it the largest stegosaur we know of. Naturally, these numbers implied it was also quite heavy, possibly tipping the scales at 5.3 tons. What's interesting is that we know for certain that exceptional individuals got even bigger. This knowledge comes from a specimen named Apex, the most expensive dinosaur ever sold. Apex is also the biggest known Stegosaurus, measuring about 27 feet, and based on fragmentary remains, paleontologists think the species could reach 30 feet in length. This size made adults untouchable to smaller predators. But the Morrison was not a forgiving place. The sheer abundance of massive carnivores meant there were still plenty of would-be predators. These included Allosaurus, the enormous Saurophaganax, and the truly terrifying Torvosaurus. To survive these relentless killers, Stegosaurus evolved one of the most brutal and effective weapons ever seen in an animal. It's the Thagomizer. Don't be fooled by its funny-sounding nature, a name famously coined in a Far Side cartoon. The Thagomizer refers to the 4 giant spikes on the end of the Stegosaurus's tail. Each sharp spike could grow to 3 feet, longer than the blade of a Japanese katana. For a long time, some thought the Thagomizer was just for display. The main belief was the tail was too rigid for any meaningful high-speed swing. Yet subsequent studies, championed by paleontologists like Robert Bakker, completely demolished this idea. These studies showed the tails lacked ossified tendons, meaning the tail was incredibly flexible and capable of a wide swinging motion of about 180 degrees. Models found it could be swung with deadly speed, possibly up to 90 miles per hour. At this rate, each spike would strike with enough power to punch clean holes straight through thick bone, while also causing catastrophic damage to internal organs. Things got more sinister. Because the spikes were narrow and long, they also created deep puncture wounds. Unlike a slashing wound, these were highly susceptible to nasty deep tissue infections. That is to say, even if a theropod survived an encounter, it could still die weeks later from the resulting sepsis. And this isn't speculation. It's showcased by a rare fossil representing one of the most unfortunate dinosaurs ever discovered. A 147-million-year-old Allosaurus from Wyoming had a peculiar injury to its pubic bone. The wound was deep, circular, and bore straight through the bone. Based on these characteristics, paleontologists concluded the Allosaurus sustained this injury after a failed hunting attempt on a Stegosaurus. No other animal in the Morrison possessed a weapon that could make such an injury, and a Stegosaurus spike fits it perfectly. Researchers further deduced the grim story from the bone. The Allosaurus survived, but the bone shows it developed a massive abscess. This infection likely caused it to limp for weeks, unable to hunt until it finally succumbed. Sadly for other theropods, such fates may have been common. Analysis of recovered Stegosaurus specimens found that nearly 10% of injuries to their spikes were consistent with high-speed, high-impact collisions. These were breaks from hitting something hard. In some cases, evidence even suggested the spikes would get lodged in predators, similar to porcupine quills. For what it's worth, there are other theropod remains that reflect a Stegosaurus attack, including another Allosaurus specimen whose vertebrae was skewered by a Thagomizer. In this case, it's unknown if the victim died or was just maimed for life, as the wound never fully healed. Needless to say, Stegosaurus was one terrific dinosaur, whose design allowed it to turn the tables on large predators. And the Thagomizer wasn't even the full picture. It had another adaptation, its gular armor. Even if you know Stegosaurus, you may have never heard of this. Most Stegosaurus finds lack it, as these small bones scattered after death. But a few exceptional specimens show it had a strip of armor under the neck. This armor, composed of hundreds of pebble-like osteoderms, provided good protection to its vital arteries, making a throat bite difficult. Furthermore, while fragile, Stegosaurus had plates on the top of its neck that, along with its gular armor, might have made biting the neck an awkward task for theropods. This would have forced them to find other areas to attack, likely bringing them within striking range of its tail. And speaking of neck plates, we cannot talk about this icon without discussing its famous back plates. Ironically, many first thought these plates deterred predators. In reality, they were too delicate. Made of thin osteoderms, they grew out of the skin in a vertical fashion, sometimes reaching 2 feet tall. Their true size is unknown, as they were likely covered in keratin sheaths that enlarged them. So, if not for defense, what were they for? Estimates suggest there were 17 to 22 plates in total. The modern consensus is that they were multi-purpose tools. One primary use was likely social display, allowing the animals to recognize members of their own species. Another powerful hypothesis is thermoregulation. The plates were highly vascularized. As blood pumped through them, it would be cooled by the air. This biological radiator was useful for a large-bodied animal living in the hot, dry Morrison. And in true Swiss Army knife fashion, there's another proposed use. Certain paleontologists think they could be pumped with blood, creating a bright red blushing display to make a predator think twice before trying to take a bite out of a Thagomizer-wielding tank. Now, with all this said, the Stegosaurus was certainly brawn over brains. While it had the power, the brains did seem to be missing. A Stegosaurus only had a brain about the size of a walnut. Relative to its huge multi-ton body, this gives it one of the smallest brain-to-body ratios of any dinosaur. And yes, while brain-to-body ratio is not a perfect way to gauge intelligence, many paleontologists have interpreted the Stegosaurus's small brain as a sign of very limited intelligence. This belief led to one of the most persistent Stegosaurus misconceptions, that it had a second brain. After Stegosaurus was first described, Othniel Marsh discovered what he called a large canal in the hip region, a cavity that could have fit an organ 20 times the size of the actual brain. To him, this organ must have been another brain, a posterior brain, to control the back part of the body. We now know, of course, that this is incorrect. This canal housed a glycogen body, a structure not unique to Stegosaurus. The exact function of this organ is unknown, but scientists reckon it has something to do with regulating glycogen, a form of energy storage throughout its body. We see this same structure in modern birds. It is not nervous tissue, and it certainly is not a brain. To be fair to Stegosaurus, you don't need much brain power to carry out simple functions. You just need to know how to eat and when to smash an attacker with your Thagomizer. If brains did fail, it could still rely on one more advantage: numbers. Like many Jurassic herbivores, stegosaurs lived in herds, at least sometimes. Discovered trackways in Colorado showed 4 to 5 individuals traveling together. Another trackway showed a baby and presumably their parent walking together. This social behavior dramatically increased protection, especially for the young, which was essential in the Morrison. Yet for large adults, it was likely a different story. They probably needed little protection, and may have spent a good chunk of their lives as solitary creatures. On top of this, the Stegosaurus had some pretty messed up teeth. Its 78 teeth had strange indentations on the top, giving them the appearance of being a bit sharp. Not to worry, Stegosaurus was still undoubtedly a herbivore. We aren't really sure how these odd teeth functioned, but the best guess is that they were designed to snip tough plants and partially grind material in a simple up-and-down fashion. Given its low-slung head, paleontologists think its diet consisted of mosses, ferns, horsetails, cycads, and conifers. It was perhaps thanks to these abundant plants that Stegosaurus achieved a considerable range, showing up in 5 different states in North America. And it went international too. Remains of ungulatus were also discovered in Portugal. This makes sense, as the 2 continents were much closer at the time. Naturally, living in 2 distinct areas brought Stegosaurus into contact with a whole host of dinosaurs. This included a gobsmacking amount of sauropods and theropods, such as Allosaurus, Ceratosaurus, Torvosaurus, Apatosaurus, Diplodocus, and Supersaurus. And this is only scratching the surface. While dinosaurs made the environment hectic, they weren't alone. Non-dinosaurs consisted of fish, amphibians, crocodile relatives, turtles, pterosaurs, and early mammal-like forms. With so much life, you must be thinking the Morrison was a safe haven, minus them eating each other. And yet, while it could be resource-abundant, the Morrison Formation was also at times the closest thing to hell on Earth. It experienced super droughts. Studies indicate the environment had 2 distinct seasons, wet and dry. In the wet season, plains flooded. In the dry season, resources dwindled and bodies of water shriveled up. This put catastrophic pressure on the ecosystem, leading to widespread starvation and even cannibalization amongst theropods. Strangely, or perhaps not, considering how metal it was, the Stegosaurus seemed to thrive on this chaos. At least, it seemed to do so more than others. The location of Stegosaurus remains usually aligns with the drier parts of the Morrison, showcasing a preference for the more arid areas. Its ability to weather the storm is also reflected by its extended existence. The genus Stegosaurus persisted for over 10 million years, an above-average lifespan for a Morrison animal, and one more reason why it's such an icon. But for all of its amazing traits, for all its toughness and specialized weaponry, the Stegosaurus never saw the end of the Jurassic period. It died out just as the last stage of the Jurassic began. It's not 100% established what took out this absolute unit. There was no asteroid, no single cataclysm. Instead, paleontologists speculate that a slow, grinding flora and fauna turnover created great changes in the environment. The plants it specialized in eating may have begun to disappear. The shifting climate added fuel to the fire, bringing its own new obstacles. And ultimately, this slow, creeping change overpowered just about the toughest dinosaur to have lived during the Late Jurassic.